The CELESTION Creamback. Very often overlooked. Such a nice speaker. It's overlooked because it has those two very famous older brothers, the Creamback and the Vintage 30. But it is also the most requested speaker on this channel, and that is why we are checking out all three versions of the Creamback today. And we're gonna compare them with a great sounding Vintage 30 from 2003. And we all know that 2003 is a wonderful year for vintage 30s. So I got those four speakers in one 4x12 cab. And to make this video even more fantastic, one of you guys can win one of the speakers inside that cab. You can win a Creamback speaker today. So let's jump right into it and let's make this world a little more creamy. Just a few quick words about my rig. As usual, I'm playing my Fernandez baritone guitar with EMG pickups, and we're playing, maybe you can see it, that d-moll over there, one of my favorite amps, and I'm using it in this video, maybe not because it's the perfect match, but because it has such a complex and sophisticated mid-range that is just great for comparing speakers, because I want you to hear the differences. So I'm going straight. No, I'm actually using a tube screamer in between the guitar and the amp to make things a little tighter. Then we are going over there in my live room. So it's really loud over there. I'm playing a real cab, you know, this is real. You know, this is the real studio. So I'm playing that Kohle audio cab that you have all heard in my last two videos or something. And it's really surprising how many of you love that cab and whatever. So I'm using that Kohle audio oversized cab called Lungo. And in that cab, we got those four speakers and they are mic'd with SM57s. The miking is not always the same, but I will talk about that in a minute, and maybe I'm even gonna move some microphones, because remember, this is a real studio. Magic. Okay, we're gonna start with the Vintage 30. All speakers are 8 ohm. I pulled that one from a Mesa Boogie rectifier cab from 2003, which is a great year for vintage 30s. And without any additional filtering, no high cut, no low cut, no nothing, it sounds like this. And that is a tone that we all know, right? We all love the Vintage 30 because it's so easy to mic. The mid-range just sounds very balanced. You got that upper mid bite that really makes heavy and high gain guitars jump right in your face. There's a thick low end, but it's tight enough for even the fastest metal riffs. Just a beautiful speaker. So let's switch to the first Creamback speaker. And that is the 8 ohm version of the heavy magnet Creamback. So the G12M, which I think is the closest to the Vintage 30 actually. The one that people use the most for high gain tones, I guess. I'll stop talking now, let's listen. And that sounds really cool as well. So it sounds kind of different, but let's start with the things that are similar between the V30 and the Creamback H. And that is that they have a very balanced and nice sounding mid-range that just works on a guitar tone like this. There's just nothing weird about the mid-range. It's hard to explain. It just sounds balanced. But the main difference for me, let's start there, is that the Creamback sounds a lot more woody than the Vintage 30. And the reason is it seems to have quite a lot more lower mids. Let's say from 500 Hertz to 1.5 kilohertz or something. So that gives it that woody, some might say creamy, some might also say honky character. A lot more lower mid-range that reminds me a little more of a Greenback. That gives it a lot of character, that gives it a nice voice, but also makes it a little more boxy sounding compared to the V30. Let's go back to the V30. You know what I mean? This is just a little cleaner. Creamback. It also has that 1K roar. That is nice. Whereas the V30 has a more present peak in the upper mids that makes it sound colder and more aggressive. So the V30 just sounds a little cleaner, and the Creamback just sounds a little more creamy, has a more pronounced lower mid-range, but beautifully balanced. Another thing that I hear is that there's a lot more high-end sizzle coming from the Creamback. That once again reminds me of a greenback. But you know what? Most of the time when I'm recording, I'm using a high cut filter on the way in, sitting in between 11 and 12 kilohertz. That just removes that higher end sizzle right from the start, and that just makes you hear the mid-range a lot better, because you just don't want that. And it also makes the speaker sound a little more like it actually sounds in the room. So let's just turn that on and off. And that makes you hear those beautiful vocal frequencies, the lower mid-range of that speaker, a lot better. I forgot to say the low end is great on both speakers. And ga 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 ga. And one thing I gotta say, if you use the same mic position on the V30 and on the Creamback's gonna sound quite a bit duller and darker. So I had to move the mic a little more into the middle on the Creamback H to get that tone you are hearing now, to get the same attack. So it's not the same mic position. If you use the same mic position, the Creamback will sound a little more muffled and darker. So you got to move the mic a little closer to the dust cap to get the same brightness, the same direct attack like a vintage 30, and that's what you want for a metal tone. What you can take away is this is a great sounding speaker. Don't forget that we are using a vintage 30 that is 20 years old, and I can tell you it sounds great. And I gotta say, the Creamback has a different character, but it doesn't sound worse than the V30. It sounds less clean, it has a more pronounced lower mid-range, sounds more vocal, some might say a little honky or boxy, a matter of taste of course. The low end is great, it has a certain high-end sizzle, but that can be removed easily when recording with a simple filter. And it has a voice. It has a really, really pronounced, beautiful voice and a very balanced mid-range. So, you know, that speaker doesn't need to be blended or anything to be used in a metal production. Great speaker, well done. Let's move on to the next one. And that is the G12M, the medium-sized magnet, which is a little more like a vintage design or a traditional design. So what they say is that it is voiced more like a greenback, but with a higher power rating. So let's see what it sounds like. So let's switch from the Creamback H, heavy magnet, to the Creamback M. And that is more vintage, right? Oh wow, that sounds different, right? That sounds way darker. That sounds way darker than the H version. Almost sounds like doing this. So this is like the the neck position of the Creamback H. No, it sounds a lot darker. The low end seems to be a lot looser as well. And we have an even more pronounced lower mid-range voicing. which just doesn't sound as precise as the other two speakers. But that's what we expect from a magnet like this, right? So a heavier ceramic magnet will produce more high end. But don't get me wrong, this is still beautiful. It's just way darker, and there's a very full, very vocal lower mid-range. This is still a beautiful tone, it just doesn't sound very metal. What I wanted to show you is the difference between the Creamback H and the Creamback M with pretty much the same microphone position. So the Creamback M will sound more vintage, will sound looser in the low end, will have even more lower mids, will sound darker overall, and just not as precise and clean and aggressive and in your face like those two other speakers. But you know what? I think if I move the microphone more into the middle, and that will be almost right in the middle, I'm pretty sure I can get a tone that is a lot more usable for a metal production. So get closer to what the V30 and the Creamback H sound like. I gotta go now, I'm back in a minute. So this is the Creamback M with the brighter mic position. Aha. And that is so much better, right? It still sounds vintage, especially in the low end, because the low end is just less tight and less focused compared to the V30. But that's not because it's thin, it's more because there's so much lower mid information. But now it doesn't sound that cloudy anymore. All right, interesting. So the M version is just the more vintage sounding, the more buttery sounding, a little darker sounding version of the Creamback. Interesting. But nice. I want to move on to the third speaker we got here, and that is the Neodymium version, the Creamback Neo version. And you guessed it, right? It doesn't have a ceramic magnet, it's a neodymium magnet, which is way lighter. So it's only half the size of the other two. And if you are still carrying around 4x12 cabs, that comes very handy, right? So that is so cool. So if it sounds the same, if it sounds just as good, you know, I would always try to use neodymium magnets because I'm old and I don't want to carry things around and I'm too poor for having roadies. I'm gonna start with, let's say, the Creamback H, which is my favorite so far. Here we go. And that sounds like the Metal Zone version of the Creamback. That sounds a lot brighter and a lot more scooped. Where's all the mid-range? Really cold and aggressive. Concentrate on the mids when I go back to the Creamback H. La 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 la. So that upper mid bite, that aggressive is actually closer to a V30, but the whole complex mid-range is missing. So that is my least favorite. It sounds very tight though, and it has a nice bite, so maybe we can use it for blending, right? Let's just blend this one with the V30 and see what happens. Flip the polarity. Fine tune the two speakers, phase relation. And boom. And suddenly this speaker gets a purpose, right? So I would spontaneously call this a speaker that you can use for blending. Whenever you don't want to fuck with the mid-range of your existing speaker and just want to add something around it, a little more low end, a little more bite. If you want a lot of precision. Nice, right? But you know what I want to do now? I want to move the mic on the Creamback Neo, move that one a little more to the outside. Also much better, right? Still scooped and cold. So much better. Still my least favorite speaker, but it becomes a lot more usable. And again, don't forget, it's a pretty good speaker for blending. But you know, that's why I actually never use the same mic positions for my speaker tests. People sometimes ask, why don't you do that? Well, the reason is it makes no sense. You know, I gotta find the right mic position for every speaker. So before we listen to all four speakers in the mix with the infamous Grindstein song, the d-moll going into all four speakers, before we do that, I want to give you my little summary. First of all, the G12H Creamback, the heavy magnet version, is a fucking amazing speaker. A great speaker, great mid-range. Again, if you want a more woody sounding, more vocal sounding version of the V30, but again, tight enough and precise enough and aggressive enough for even modern metal, check out that speaker. If you want to go more vintage, check out the M version, like the smaller magnet. It gets a lot more creamy, it gets darker, the mid-range down there gets more complex. Maybe this is a little more suited for vintage metal, for doom, for stuff like that, because it sounds less precise and less tight in the low end. Compared to the H or the V30. And then we got the Neodymium version, and to be honest, I still prefer to carry double the weight and use the H or M version. They just sound better, the mid-range is more complex and whatever. It just sounds better. But I'm not saying it's not usable. I have shown you can blend that speaker. It has a very scooped mid-range, so if you have a guitar tone that asks for that, maybe that's the right speaker for you. It's not a bad speaker, but I would go for the ceramic versions. Depending on how modern or how vintage you are, you can choose the H or the M version. Yeah, so we still have to carry the weight. It's sad, but true. So I told you can win one of the speakers from this video, and that is the one right in the middle. That is the G12M version of the Creamback. You will get exactly the speaker that I've been using in this video. I will take it out of the cap and send it to you. But as usual, you got to do something for me as well, right? So first thing you do is you subscribe to this channel. Okay, bing bong, subscribe. Second thing is you subscribe to my email list below. You got to do that because otherwise I cannot reach you, right? Subscribe to my email list. There's a link below. And next thing you do is you leave a comment under this video telling me something nice. I need that, you know? I need that sometimes. No, subscribe to this channel, subscribe to my email list, and finally leave a comment under this video, and I will choose one of you, and I will announce that in exactly 2 weeks. Is that okay? 2 weeks. I will announce it. You're not going to miss it. I will get in touch with the winner. And I got to say thank you to both Celestion Speakers and Tube Amp Doctor who sent me those 3 speakers. And the cool thing is they just sent me the speaker and let me do whatever the fuck I want. So what you've been watching is just my opinion. And once again, there's a link to all those speakers below and also to the other gear used in this video. I've talked so much, I'm tired now. That's all for today. Boys and girls, I gotta say bye-bye. I gotta say, see you in hell, motherfuckers. Bye-bye.